So, to situate this for our listeners, how would you describe the current political movement in Assam? Like, what are the key shifts in power that form the backdrop to this campaign?
I would say that the current political movement in Assam is very similar to what we have seen in Bihar and elsewhere. It is very much majoritarian driven and very much driven on a specific agenda of erosion of Muslim identity and citizenship within the country. In terms of Assam specifically, I would say that from 2016 onwards, this trend is very visible because in 2016 when 2016 2017 when former Congress chief minister of Assam Tarun Gogoi was towards the far end of his political career, and also the state was going towards an election, there was already a shift in Assam political narrative from linguistic minorities, or rather, this idea of Assamese identity, which was based on language, which was already at that point moving towards an Assamese identity, which is not just based on language, but also on being a Hindu. Okay. So this shift is already there for last 10 years, which is very different than what Assam politics has been before 2016. And obviously, in the recent times, we have seen that this shift has intensified and it has more intently impacted the Indian Muslims in different parts of the country, including in the state of Assam.
And how do you think these fault lines are showing up in the digital disinformation which DHRD tracked?
So, in some ways, the digital hemisphere that we have, or this virtual space that we have, it is a mirror which distorts and amplifies what is there in the society, right? And it allows for production of hate speech at scale, disinformation at scale. But it would be unfair to say that these disinformation and hate speech doesn't exist and it is only created at the virtual world, right? So what it is doing is basically magnifying. So not just mirroring, but rather magnifying what you have as fault lines within a society. And this is also what we witnessed when we were monitoring Assam election campaign, that the narrative of a Hindu-Muslim binary, which was created, right? That the Muslims are outsiders and they're coming in and voting and hold. The idea that key candidates are somehow aligned to Pakistan and they're, completely sort of not paying attention to the fact that these are the families which have also sort of held Assam together for quite a long period of time, especially the Gogoi family, right? So the idea to take those little kernels and then magnify them and amplify the information in a way to then disregard the Muslim identity, to disregard non-BJP identities, is what we witnessed at scale in this campaign during the elections. What was even more interesting was the fact that a lot of this amplification on communal grounds is actually in violation of the model code of conduct. Now we know that the election commission has changed. The power of how the election commission is functioning and determined, or how the election commissioner himself is appointed, that has changed over the last 3 years. But the model code of conduct is more or less the same so far, right? So the model code of conduct in this case is sort of giving us like a template to say that, okay, political parties cannot use communal information in their favor or to instigate voters on communal lines, right? And this was very specific in Indian context because we have seen over the period of our history, Indian history, and how communal sentiments have been utilized for vote bank politics, right? So that is why this model code of conduct very specifically has this. In this case, we literally saw breaches of 119 post campaigns that actually breached MCC guidelines, and there was zero election commission enforcement action against these guidelines. And these are only the guidelines that we are looking at from the perspective of hate speech and disinformation and the use of communal propaganda. We are not yet going into how monetary incentives were put in place to bypass MCC guidelines.
And your report also calls it the most comprehensive AI-enabled disinformation. So, what was one thing which surprised you the most, or the team, regarding how AI was used in this election?
So I think it is something that surprised a lot of us, not just our team in that sense. One of them was this AI generated video where a Muslim man was seen at the far end of the of a target that Hemant Biswas was making, and later on Hemant Biswas said that it should not be Muslim. I should have put Bangladeshi, and then the video would be fine. I mean, not really, because that's also another human, right? So there's a human rights there as well. Plus, it could also be in decent times of decent politics. We could also consider that to be sort of a instigation against another nation, right? So which would then fall under a constitutional embargo of what not to do as a good citizen. But that aside, I think this was very problematic because we do not know which AI companies are being used or which AI companies are allowing these generation of such imagery to happen, so to generate an imagery where you're targeting a person based on their individualistic or religious characters. It is not something that should be taken so lightly, that it is not just, other generation of a AI video. This is very specifically targeting because of how the person looks. Similarly, AI images, wherein you can see caricatures and cartoons which dehumanize certain groups of population. These are problematic because, first off, dehumanization at scale of a certain groups of population is not just criminal within the fair meaning of in Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, etc. But it is also criminal under the international covenants that India is signatory to, right? So there is a responsibility that we as Indians and the Indian government has towards upholding these values. And what we are seeing here is a complete disregard to these values. Right. And then on top of it, since the AI generation is also automated, what kind of companies are allowing such automations to happen? That is also a questionable problem. And in most of these imageries, as you can see in India, you do not find watermarks of which AI was used to generate this. And now if this same AI is being used for training on language moderations or other kind of content generation, etc., then this entire training database itself is rotten to start with, right? And what kind of AI then India is actually developing is a valid question in that sense.
Correct. Yeah. And how do you think this AI generated narratives differ from older forms of propaganda we've seen during, or maybe apart from India, during this Indian elections?
So in the I won't say it's too much of a difference. The only thing is that the amount of AI generation that can happen, the AI capacities of the country to create this information and propaganda, hate speech is obviously on the rise, which is not just concerning for the opposition parties of the India, but it should also be concerning for the rest of the world. What we used to earlier say, this 2 rupee IT cell, so that is going to be redundant at some point, but redundancy will not come because of layoffs or on a nice reason, but rather because you can use AI now. So I think that is what the shift and what the difference is, that this content can be generated at scale and there is less and less human oversight involved into it, which would also mean that there is less and less people who are going to say that, hey, maybe this is for the political party, but this is also morally bankrupt, So less and less value across the system. That's going to decrease. So that's what our worry is.
And your report, which I found one part which was very interesting and striking to me, was the propaganda to policy pipeline, which your report documents. So it documents the systematic targeting of Muslim communities across multiple platforms. So can you explain a bit about how these layers, like digital, electoral, physical, and cultural, these layers reinforce upon each other?
So in policy making, what you need as a starting point is something called agenda setting and framing, and then finally some decent human being sitting there saying that yes, this policy is acceptable. But at the end of the policy chain, you also have a whole public which is going to accept or reject that policy, right? And we need to understand this propaganda to policy or in the same context as a general policy making, right? In case of this AI generated or even mass coordinated generation of disinformation and hate speech, you are creating an agenda for the society wherein your minorities are the scapegoats, or rather, people who should not be there in the society, right? You're elevating and reframing and reaffirming this agenda through a constant cycle of information campaign, which is not just your election campaign, but also the information campaigns that come before the election period is even announced. And based on that framing and based on that agenda, the government picks up a policy without, and now this is very much characteristic of the BJP led governments around the country, that without much discussion, debate, or deliberation, which democracy requires, you pick up any policy, you say, look, these people want the policy, so we are bringing the policy, right? And you bring in the policy. And then you wait to see how the population is going to react. Now, I want to remind you here that in case of like the farm laws, the farmers of India reacted really adversely, and the government was able to pull the policy back. Same thing also happened one time when there was this misinformation bill, and the civil society reacted really badly, and then they said, oh, we are going to take it back. But at the same time, they also said that, oh, this is just a test. So you're passing a policy as a test. At the same time, simultaneously, you're also preparing a public which will accept that kind of a policy narrative, right? So if you are now going to pass a policy which disenfranchises Muslims, you have already prepared your public sphere, your general population to accept that, yes, Muslims are a lesser citizen, right? And that is how this whole propaganda to policy pipeline sort of manufactures and gets built in through operation of not just coordinated campaigns, disinformation, but also, targeted dehumanization and demonization of a certain community over the period of time. Yeah.
Yeah. And so this is related to platforms. So your report noted that there was zero takedowns by the platforms, like zero
Yes.
enforcement by the institutions. So
Yes.
what would a meaningful accountability look like? And do you think these platforms are structurally incapable of dealing with the scale of AI content which we have? Or is it just a question of political will?
I won't say it's a question of, I won't call it a political will. It is a question of will, but is it a political? I don't want to elevate it and put it on a high pedestal as well for that reason. So in terms of the platform, they are fully capable of finding this information. I mean, we have very sophisticated AI imagery. Even if you put an AI image of a man with a skull cap to any AI tool and say, can you alt text write this image? The AI is capable of recognizing what's happening in the image, right? So in that sense, I don't think that these multi-billion companies lack engineering or capacity or capability to moderate content at scale, specifically also when checkers like yourself or NGOs like ourselves are giving them specific information that this page, this actor, this, group is problematic. I don't think it's hard to then sieve it out. Now, for a long period of time, Meta platform in India have taken the excuse that they're hand-tied because otherwise Bajrang Dal-like organizations will come and put out their offices in Gurgaon. Fair enough, I understand that. But at the same time, they have also not done sufficient to reduce the reach of this content. So they have not done sufficient to also alter the algorithms in a way that hateful content is not reaching mass audience, and they have not done sufficient to make sure that this is not being targeted based on personal information that we share on platforms, right? What they have done instead is, and that is also something in the name of privacy, that they have allowed users to say whether they want their profiles to be seen or logged. Okay. So that is a capacity that is possible allowed in the Indian context for different users. But this can also become a roadblock when it comes to law enforcement, when it comes to identifying who the perpetrators of hate speech and hate crimes on platforms are, right? So this can also become an impediment in that sense. So they have worked on certain things very carefully, other things they have not worked on. And from my point of view, this is primarily a question of monetization. Like in our previous report from 2024, we actually showed how much money Pages like Politoons and Ulta Chashma were spending on the platform just in political advertisements right before the general elections in India. And all of these pages, they also spawn, they benefit. They also have started benefiting from monetization by monetizing the platform itself. So, from my point of view, this is an economic question, and this is a question for economics. Of economics and on how this allows the content reach, what kind of embargoes the platform is going to put on, that is completely depending upon their profits and revenues. And in case of India, obviously they are being consistently telling us that the revenues and profits are more important than human life, which is in itself very problematic.
Yeah. And one bit I left out was the 6 tier content ecosystem which the report delves on. So can you just briefly walk us through how a single narrative travels from a political leader to WhatsApp, and where does AI fit into it?
Yeah, so basically, what we have tried to do is, and this is a little thing that we do within DHRD, that we also try to, balance our report based on investigation, but also then try to theorize across different stages. So, from where we basically look at it is from this theory of how far right networks instigate violence and then actually conduct violence. Okay. So within this, this stage, within this trajectory towards creation of a narrative for violence and actual conduction of the violence, there are multiple stages wherein different people play different role. Okay. So for example, your political parties will be or political actors would be the first people to just sort of like instigate, what do you call, like this, sorry, I'm forgetting the word in English, the chingari in Hindi, right? Like just a firelight. So they would just show the light, and the digital infrastructure of the entire party that will pick that up and start distributing it, right? And then you will have your ideological media amplifiers, other identity-based organizations spreading out these informations. Within this, your existing infrastructures of WhatsApp group, like the Anna Pramukh WhatsApp groups that many others have also written about, and Boom has also spoken about. They will become key players in carrying forward that information. Okay. And now the information has spread. Now you start generating caricatures to just reinforce that information ecosystem. And that's how you basically complete the cycle of creating a society which is adverse to certain communities.
And lastly, question, you were just discussing this in the morning, and I don't know if you have the answer to this, but just like if in the morning I was looking at a video because we were working on a similar report about the ad transparency report, how much the parties have been pumping in the money in these ads. So there was an ad regarding from in one of the pages where Gaurav Gogoi is supposed to receive a call from an ISI agent, and they are telling him that Rahul Gandhi has appointed you on because we have told him, and all those crap. And and it's clearly AI generated, and there's no marker. So I was just thinking, have we reached that level of polarized, since the society is so polarized right now? And so does our confirmative bias even allows us to think that this is AI or not? Like, does that for the general people, does it matter that this is AI or not? Because it's kind of feeding into their what they're already believing it.
Okay, so from where I see it, and obviously I also want to say it with caveats, because obviously this will require a massive amount of research into how Indian population in far off villages even perceive these realities, right? But we are living in a post-truth world, right? We are living in a post-truth reality where reality is being manufactured on social media platforms through these AI apps and other technology apps, etc. We are also living, and specifically for India, I think it was until a certain point of time also considered to be a very rich ecosystem of information, because every kind of information was possible. This is increasingly not so, and that is because of the algorithms and how the algorithms function in India, that there is paucity of information from one side and not from another. If this was done in a plural society where it's a free marketplace of information, I think it would have been taken much, like we could have relaxed a bit and we would have been like, okay, it doesn't matter so much because, there's this very interesting saying in Hindi that you give us the tat and we will find out the tartharth of it ourselves, right? They gave us the food, gave us an information, and we'll find the interpretation of it ourselves. And that goes very well with like Indian way of thinking, Indian way of life, that we make our own interpretations of whatever is happening around us. But in this case, you're only getting an information of what is happening from a very lopsided view of the society, right? So whatever interpretation, therefore, the community or the people and the public at large is making is also based on that very lopsided view, and that is basically what is dangerous. If we had a parity of algorithms, I don't think this would have been that much problematic. But since we don't have the parity of algorithm amplification, it is problematic. So you then have to see who is having the mic and for how long. So that's how I will say. So it's confirmation bias definitely gets confirmed here because of lack of information from the other side at all. So yeah.
Yeah.
And obviously the attempts to create that lack of, fill in that lack of information, to fill that gap, are also being stifled by the government of India itself. So yeah, that's that's my reading of it.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time.